If you want to start carrying a sketchbook, what's the best kind of materials to use? What sort of books should you get? What are the best things to draw with? In this video, I'm going to show you some of the things that I've been using over the years. An important thing for me with a sketchbook is that I can fit it easily into a standard jacket pocket and that it's easy to carry around with me, not too bulky. I've been using these kinds of sketchbooks for a long time. These ones are about 3.5 inches wide by 5.5 inches tall. That's roughly 9 centimeters wide by 14 centimeters tall. Occasionally slightly larger ones, like this sort of sketchbook, just a little bit bigger, as you can see there, but still fits into most of the pockets that I'll have on my jackets. These are not too thick, they're about a finger's width. They've got plenty of pages inside them, and so I find this is convenient. Occasionally I've found thicker sketchbooks in some art stores, but I don't really like those because they just become too bulky and heavy. And also the back of the book can start to break apart with heavy use. These ones are modelled on the more expensive moleskin type, which I've got one of here. Very nice sketchbooks, but they are relatively expensive. This one here is about half the price. Similar sort of cover, that nice sort of soft looking cover, but it gives you enough firmness to support the book well. And they've got a couple of nice features as well, like this piece of elastic which you can use to hold the book closed, but you can also use it on a windy day to just hold one of the pages open. And a little tip that I'll give you is sometimes if it's a bit breezy, I'll sometimes bring an extra rubber band with me which I can put around the other page so that it holds the whole thing a bit more flat. And I can take that off, and in the back of these books they have another nice feature, which is a little pouch built into the back of the book so things don't fall out. And that's very useful for storing things like my own business cards or other artists' cards if I go to visit them at a gallery. Other little notes, tickets, that sort of thing. A rubber band to put around the front, or even a little viewfinder if you want to use one of them. And that's something I'll talk about in a future video. The other nice feature these little books have is a little elastic loop for putting a pen through, and I find that's just a nice extra to have. If you don't have these on a sketchbook that you buy, in a later video I'm going to show you how you can actually make some of these and add them to enhance your own sketchbook. This is one of the moleskin books. Very nice books, relatively expensive I find. Like the other books, they've got this nice little pocket in the back, it's very well made, and a little bookmark as well that you can use. The paper in moleskin books is very high quality. Personally, I find it a little bit smoother than I actually like. I prefer actually the slightly cheaper paper because it's slightly rougher, and I just like the way it feels to draw on. But this is very good paper, and it will take a bit of a wash of colour as well. So moleskin books are lovely, and if you want that high quality and are happy with the price, I highly recommend them. This is another similar kind of book made by Rowney, a big established art materials company here in the UK. Good quality paper. This is acid-free paper, so that it will have less effect in the long term on colours. Personally, I don't think that matters too much for what I want to do, but if that's something you're concerned with, then it's a feature to look out for. And this is 100 gram per square metre weight paper, which is £65 paper. This was also a very good price, £6.95 from one of the big Glasgow art stores, so you can pick good quality sketchbooks up for a decent price. This is one of my older books. You can see the slightly larger format, no extra features on it, but you can add those, as I've mentioned. I'll look at that in a later video. Lovely paper. I've just opened this at random, but it takes pen, ink, pencil, watercolour really nicely. It's not really heavy enough paper to take a heavy-duty watercolour wash, but for adding a bit of extra colour to a sketch, then, or doing light watercolour sketches, it's fine. This is one which I've only ever bought one of. They have a thin piece of tissue paper between each of the pages, and if you like to work in dry, soft dry mediums, like if you like to use it like a soft drawing pencil, this one here is a 7B, which is a very soft regular pencil. It gives a nice dark line. Or this is a charcoal pencil, or even some of the softer coloured pencils, like this is an Inktense. It's actually water soluble as well pencil. I'll talk about these later. Then this is a good way to protect not just the original drawing from smudging, but also to stop any of the drawing medium from transferring to the opposite page. So if you like drawing with soft dry media, then this is the kind of sketchbook that I'd recommend. Now, all the books I've shown you so far have this kind of regular book, what you might call portrait format. I have also occasionally used more of a landscape format. You can also get these. And again, this is nice, especially for, obviously, landscapes. I don't always take full advantage of that, but it does gives you that nice extra spread that you can use for that. And of course, you can use it this way up as well if you wish, which I think I did there. There's a range of these things available from good art stores, but what if you can't get, if it's too expensive or you can't get to a decent art store, what are the alternatives? This is a nice cheap alternative. It's a piece of a school exercise book. I cut it down to a smaller size to fit in my pocket, and it's got lined paper in it. Some school exercise books have the odd blank page, so that might be an easy way to get started. And they're much cheaper than any of these other sketchbooks. Perfectly good paper for sketching on, and apart from the lines, you can get some nice results. If you don't mind sketching over the lines, then that's fine. So that's one cheap option. And another option here is, it's not just for saving money, but actually this allows you to experiment with different kinds of paper if you want. I actually made this out of bits of packaging from a delivery at work, and around the stuff inside the box was this really nice brown recycled paper, which I straightened out, and I've just put it together, put the whole thing together like this. I actually drilled some holes through here. And if you're going to drill through paper like this, just clamp a piece of scrap wood on either side and drill through the whole lot. And that gives you a nice neat hole on the outside of the paper. And then I've just put these little treasury tags through. If you can't get hold of these, you can just use some string through the hole and just tie it fairly loosely so that you can open the whole thing out nice and easily. So this opens out into a nice sketching surface, and it's this lovely toned paper, which is really useful if you like to add a little bit of opaque color, maybe a little bit of white to the highlights, or if you want to add some other opaque colors, then it gives a nice background for that. Nice thing with this too is because you're using bits of recycled paper, it hasn't cost you anything, so it's much easier to feel free to really play and experiment with different kinds of medium and just see what you find best. That spirit of playing is really important, I think, in exploring and developing your own creativity. So this kind of project might be worth considering doing anyway, just as a chance to experiment, whatever access you have to other materials. One of the most standard things to draw with is a pencil, possibly the first thing that many people learn to draw with. This is an HB pencil, which is the kind of standard medium softness pencil that you tend to get. They keep their point for a decent length of time, but they also make a nice mark on the paper. I like to draw with a slightly softer pencil because you get a good range of different tones, and also it's easier to vary the thickness too. 2B is a softness which is widely used for drawing. It gives you a nice range of relatively dark lines and tones when you use it for shading. It has reasonable durability, so you're not always having to keep sharpening it. Some other pencils I've got in the range. This is a 4B, a little bit darker again and softer than 7B. And the softest one I've managed to find is a 9B, which is lovely to use, but it does mean that I'm very often sharpening the end if I'm using it over any kind of larger area. But it does give some lovely expressive lines. Then you have charcoal. Personally, I don't like using charcoal in its loose form with a regular sketchbook. It's just too messy. You can get some very nice charcoal pencils, and this one here gives a nice line, but it keeps it a bit more under control. If I'm going to put this in my pocket, I usually put it into like either a little plastic bag, into a little plastic tube from something else. Maybe it's been a container for a brush or something. But in some way try and protect the end. It stops breaking the end, and you don't end up with so much charcoal in your pocket. If you're going to use something soft like charcoal or these softer pencils, then it's probably worth looking at a sketchbook that, of the type I showed you earlier, which has got tissue paper in between the pages, simply to protect them, and also to save you always having to keep spraying the drawing with fixative. You may also want to draw with a coloured pencil. This is one which I like to use. It's actually a sepia colour, gives a lovely line. It's quite soft, and it's one of the Inktense range of pencils, which are water soluble and give a really nice, dense, well saturated colour. So these are very nice to draw with. And if I draw with one of these, then I'll usually use a water brush with me at the same time, just to turn it into a wash. I'll talk more about these when I get on to looking at nice ways to add colour to your sketches. One of my other favourite soft dry media to draw with is the Conte crayons, sometimes called black chalk. You can get these in a range of colours, but the black and the sepia and the burnt sienna colours, or the umber colours, any of those earth colours are really nice to draw with, and they can give you some of that slightly warmer colour. If you're doing life studies especially, they're really good. Again, I don't often use these with a portable sketchbook just because of the issue of mess. I mean, already with my fingers I'm getting little bits of smudges off of these. But they are really nice to draw with, and again, it's the same issue as with charcoal, really, if you're going to carry these and just do some general sketching. If you prefer to draw with a pen, and it's something which I've found very useful in helping me to get a bit more committed with my drawing and a little bit bolder with it, a little more decisive. The pen I've used most over the years has been these pigment ink pens. They have a fibre tip in a range of thicknesses. I think they're anywhere between 0.1 and 1 millimetre, but my favourite range really in these is 0.3 to 0.5 millimetres. That gives a nice intermediate strength and width of line, and the tip's a little more durable than the finer ones too. They're really nice to write with. The advantage with the pigment ink, as well as its lovely dark blackness, is that it dries quickly and then it's waterproof, and it's very good then to put a watercolour wash over the top of. They're relatively inexpensive, available from a lot of good art shops and stationery stores as well. Something which I've only recently started using at the recommendation of another artist is a fountain pen. This is one of the Lamy fountain pens. They're really nice quality. I find they're very nice to use, and they're also designed for sketching. You can either use them with a cartridge, or you can buy an additional converter, which is what I've got in this one. And the quality of the nib is really good. It flows beautifully. It's lovely to write with. I'll put a link in the description for all of these different products. I went and ordered up this bottle of ink from a Japanese manufacturer, and it's called Carbon ink, and I really recommend it. They've really thought through the design of the bottle well too, as well as being aesthetically pleasing. It's got a little section inside which makes it much easier to fill your pen up without dipping it right down to the bottom of the ink and then having to mop the whole thing up. Very good, very dense black ink, but it's designed for using in a fountain pen, so there's no risk of it actually clogging the pen. It is good practice to rinse these out occasionally in between some fills, so that you don't get ink building up and drying in place, and that way you'll preserve the life of your pen and get good results for longer. The only thing with a fountain pen is that however good the ink, it does take just a little bit longer to dry depending on conditions. The carbon ink that I've been using dries fairly quickly, and you can then put a watercolour wash over it and it holds that really well. Some other inks are not quite so water fast, so you just need to play around a bit. But of course you can just use a basic ordinary fountain pen with ordinary writing ink. You'll just find that if you get any water on it, then the drawing can virtually disappear. So just be aware of that. If you can't get hold of these other pens, or if you're on a tight budget, or you're just starting out and you're not quite sure about the whole thing, one pen I really recommend is probably the very, very cheap pen, and what I think is probably the best pen in the world, in my personal opinion, and that's the Bic biro. These crystal ones, the ones with the plain, clear plastic body, medium-sized ball on the end of them, and just this simple little cap. These are ones I've found to be almost the most reliable pens I've ever used. They're very cheap. You can buy them in sets. If one of them gets blocked up, you can just throw it away and get another one. They produce a really nice range of lines. They're beautiful to write with. You can write very expressively with them. And they're also really good for sketching. And the ink is relatively waterproof. So I have managed to put a watercolor wash over a drawing made with a Bic biro. Very nice to carry. It's no great disaster if you lose it because they're not that expensive, and really nice general purpose pen, but good for sketching. If you can't get hold of one of them, again, any fairly cheap biro will do, but just try with whatever you've got. The important thing is to get started, looking around you, observing and sketching, and not worry too much about whether you've got the best materials. But obviously, if you can get good quality stuff, then as you go along, it will help you to produce better results more consistently. You feel like you're investing in yourself a bit more, and that in itself is a good part of committing yourself to your journey of artistic development. What if you want to add some color to your sketches? Let's look at that in the next video.